talking to the people, right? How will they benefit from this? How would I benefit from it if I did it more often?
Okay, so I think one of the first things we want to try to lay out is, what exactly is yoga?
Yes.
So a lot of people assume that yoga is what you would find on an app, where it's just exercise based and all of that. But yoga isn't actually just exercise. The physical practice of yoga is actually a small portion of what the entire concept of yoga is. Right? Yoga is all about a consciousness and awareness. So when people talk about yoga, they immediately say, "Oh yeah, you mean like where you do a downward facing dog, all of that?"
Yeah.
And that's right. They're right. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's just the physical practice, which is a small part. A lot of it comes down to the whole philosophy of why you're practicing it, right? It's about harmony. It's about energy. It's about being able to be present. And if you notice, the term I keep using is it's present.
Yeah.
It's because when you're doing yoga or when you're practicing yoga, you have to be present with what you're doing. Your mind can't be floating and doing other things and not paying attention to what you're doing, because 9 times out of 10, if you're doing that, you're probably going to get hurt, or you're probably just going to be unable to follow the sequence you're supposed to.
And you're not going to maximize the benefits.
You're not going to maximize the benefits. And to put it into perspective, I could be sitting right here with my hands together, with my legs crossed or uncrossed, and just taking deep breaths. And that could already be an entry point into that, right? One thing we're noticing a lot with people during the pandemic is that something as simple as breathing is already something we tend to forget. Take note, it's an automatic function, right? We breathe anytime we just need air. But what tends to happen is that we end up holding our breath a lot. By doing so, we actually trigger responses in our body that actually make our body guard and make them more protective, which then stresses out without even realizing it.
That's interesting.
I'll give you an example. Let's say what's a good, like, let's say you would like to watch Jaws or a horror film, right? And you're always anticipating this part where the shark comes out. So you're sitting in the chair and you're like, you're just there. Everything's tightening up because you're getting tense. So you're triggering already that whole fight or flight response, right? But what we don't realize is that these muscles here are already starting to tense up because our muscles in our neck actually have a direct link to our cranial nerves in the brain. And so when those start firing up, we're already triggering that response. And what's happening is that our breath is actually slowing, not because we're taking breaths, but because we're not breathing. So we're waiting for that. And then when something crazy happens, you're like, right? And there's that deep breath. There's that like, whoa. And then we're like, okay. Then we breathe again. But then after that, we're all tingly and whatnot. And that's an example. And whenever you're talking, we'll take that to the workplace. Let's say you're in an online meeting and you're talking to your boss and he's ripping you a new one and you're just like, you're like there, or you're stressed out during a presentation, you're already doing the exact same thing. You're holding your breath. So sometimes what I actually have people do in the middle of all of that is, let's say you're my boss and you're ripping me a new one. You can just stare blankly at the screen if you don't want to close your eyes because your boss is staring at you, and just take a pause and take 3 deep breaths. And what the deep breaths do is that they help relax your vagus nerve a little bit, which is in charge of all of those automatic functions. And by doing that, it also reduces the stress hormones in your body. And that's just by taking 3 short breaths.
You know what I've been doing during what's parasympathetic breathing? Is that what it's called? I've been doing a lot more of that, or box breathing, during the pandemic, after workout, just more for the body. But then what I've realized also is when I'm super stressed, in the shower or in bed before sleeping, like last night, I literally did box breathing of, I counted 20 box breathing, in 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, out 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, and in again. I did that 20 times. And, I just feel myself relax a little bit more. And it helps me really become what you're saying, mindful and present. And I guess that's all part of yoga as well.
Well, so for example, box breathing is a simple example of an entry point to yoga as well. But where did you learn that?
Sports and physical therapy, and you read about the Navy SEALs doing it before they get into a stressful situation.
And you have to remember, like, yoga's been around for quite some time, right? That's like over almost like 1,000 years or so. So they kind of gotten into this, right?
They
I'm like, formal medicine has only been around for like centuries, but these guys have had an ancient practice.
I didn't even know that. That's pretty cool.
So they've been around for a while. I mean, and so if you think about it, it's a very simple activity with very minimal equipment investment, with a very minimal, like, you don't even need a fancy yoga mat. You could just get a shawl and lay it out. And the idea behind it is that the only reason why yoga is expensive these days is because it's commercialized.
Yeah.
But the actual true form of it, you can go barefoot on the grass and wherever, and that's fine.
I think it's even better when you go barefoot on the grass.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. For me,
get grounded and all
exactly.
that. Yeah.
And so there are even schools of thought. There's literature within the spiritual community where they say that basically having a barrier between your feet and the ground limits energy transfer.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If you think about it from a physics perspective, if you're standing on a yoga mat and the ground is, let's say, has a level of current through it, you're actually insulating your foot from it, right? And we'll accept the physics explanation.
Yeah.
But why can't we accept the New Age explanation, right? Or like the energy explanation? And it's very similar information. It's just different presentations.
Yeah.
So of course, I try not to be too New Agey about it, right? And be too out there. But the idea is that when you're doing any type of yoga practice, when you're doing any type of mindfulness practice, you need to be comfortable with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be crazy and fancy. I know people who need to have their mala beads on, who need to have to burn incense and all of that.
Whatever,
I'm like, all right, great. If it works for you, great.
Yeah.
But don't think that that's the way you need to do it.
Okay.
It's all about being able to take a pause, being able to just blank out your mind and frame it all out a little bit more. Take that deep breath. And it starts as simple as that.
So this is me on a daily basis. If I'm not doing yoga or if I'm not doing something where I'm mindful and present, my mind's going work, home. I have to do this, I have to do that. Just tasks of everything I need to do. And my mind's just going over and over and over this all day long, right? Meeting coming up, okay, prep for this meeting, I got to do this. Going 100 miles an hour and thinking, okay, if I don't do this, this is going to happen. So you're thinking the future, you're thinking what's going to happen, you think all of these things. And it's hard to be mindful when you're always thinking of everything, right? And so I only got mindful or learned to be mindful or present in certain situations. And yoga, when I've done it, you're focused on your breathing, you're focused on your body part that you're stretching, and the focus is just there presently, right? Similar to when you go, have you been fishing?
Yeah.
When you fish, I went fishing my first time in my life.
It has a very rhythmic thing.
Yeah, and you're just focused on that thing that you just put into the river or into the wherever lake, and you just watch it. You
definitely went fly fishing.
Fly fishing, 100%, right?
Fly fishing can be very hypnotic.
It's super hypnotic. I was just tossing it there, and then you go that, and then it just follows the flow of the water, and before you know it, I was out there for maybe 4 or 5 hours. Didn't even eat lunch, and we were just having a heck of a time. And you feel so zen and relaxed after it because you're not thinking of what I have to do tomorrow, what I have to do tonight, what my wife is doing, what my kids are doing. You're just focused on this thing for hours. And it seems boring, but I felt so rejuvenated after. And similar with yoga, I'm in there for a good hour, hour and a half, just focused on stretching, focused on breathing, and focused on this body part I'm working on at any given point. And it just, when you come out there, refreshed, right? And that's something where I feel like I definitely need to do this more often.
So here's a funny thing, like a lot of people like look at yoga and they always see the spiritual sense of it, right? So I'll give you an example. If you've gone to a yoga class back when they had yoga studios, usually at the end of the class, everyone's like seated down, doing the breathing exercises. One practice that everyone has is omming, like when they go om.
Okay.
So a lot of people will associate that, okay, there's a spiritual reason to it. But what people don't realize is that, and this is where I come in, there's actually a scientific reason why it works.
Okay.
And that's because the low frequency of that whole om, and the reason why you do it at a very specific frequency and pitch is because it actually stimulates your vocal cords, which then massages out your vagal nerve, which then helps you with your breathing. So it's actually there to de-stress you. The reason why you're listening to low frequency music when you do yoga and not like hip hop and R&B is because the low frequency actually stimulates that relaxation. And it increases that sense of euphoria afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So now I am putting context to like everything you do in the studio, giving it some like medical context or some scientific context. And when people come to see me in the office, depending on when their session is, sometimes I'll even just play some low frequency music without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And so we'll just go through movement sequences where it's there and they feel so much better.
That's awesome.
And I don't even have to tell them this is what we did.
Yeah.
It's more of like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And if they feel great, then that's great. I'll leave it at that. Because sometimes too much information can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so you just leave it at that. If you made a person feel better, you don't have to give them all the reasons why. Just know that, okay, you felt better, then we'll keep at this. We'll stay constant.
I like
and then
it.
how do we replicate this at home?